Have you ever wondered if the chaos we see in the world today was spoken about long before we were even born? The conflicts, the unrest, the cries for peace that never seem to last. What if none of it is random? What if every headline we see, every tremor of war, every rising tension in the Middle East is part of a story already written? A prophecy declared thousands of years ago, waiting for its moment to unfold. That question is not meant to stir fear, but to awaken something deeper within you. Because when life feels uncertain, when the future feels fragile, prophecy reminds us that nothing is without purpose. The human heart longs for stability. We want to know where we are heading, why we face what we face, and whether the suffering we see all around us will ever make sense. Yet so often, the noise of life drowns out those questions. We push them aside, pretending the world is under control until a new war breaks out, a new crisis erupts, and suddenly we're reminded that control is an illusion. But prophecy shatters the illusion not by offering despair, but by revealing direction. It shows us that even in the chaos there is order, even in the shaking there is a plan. Think about that for a moment. If the world truly were without meaning, if conflict were only chance and suffering were only fate, how hopeless would that be? But if the struggles of nations and the unrest of our times were seen long ago, then every trial we face is not a dead end, it is a signpost, and signposts are not there to confuse us, they are there to guide us. This is why prophecy matters now more than ever. We are living in a time when the world feels like it is spinning out of control, yet prophecy tells us it is not spinning aimlessly. It is moving toward fulfillment. It is moving toward something bigger than politics, bigger than armies, bigger than anything humanity can control. And here's the most powerful truth. If prophecy is real on the world stage, then it is also real in your life. The same God who speaks of nations speaks of you. The same God who foretold battles and kingdoms also knows your battles, your struggles, your future. You are not here by accident. You are not living in these times by coincidence. You are part of this story, chosen to be alive in an age when ancient words are becoming present reality. That is not something to fear. That is something to embrace. Because when you realize that history is unfolding exactly as foretold, your fear turns into faith. Your uncertainty turns into courage, and your life takes on a purpose greater than you imagined. So as we move forward, keep this in your heart. Prophecy is not meant to leave you trembling. It is meant to leave you standing. It is a gift of clarity in an age of confusion, a reminder that no matter how loud the storms of this world grow, there is a voice above it all, guiding, directing, and calling you to rise. Stay with me, because the more you see how prophecy is unfolding in our world, the more you will discover not just the meaning of history, but the meaning of your own place within it. And that realization changes everything. When Ezekiel spoke of visions thousands of years ago, he was not describing distant poetry or vague symbolism. He was recording a warning, a revelation so precise and so profound that it still shakes hearts today. His words were not bound by time. They were breathed out to reach across generations, to echo in an age like ours when nations rise with defiance, when powers align with arrogance, when the ground trembles under the weight of conflict. Ezekiel saw what many could not, the unfolding of events that humanity would one day stand inside of, and now here we are. The prophecy of Gog and Magog is not just about a distant war or ancient kingdoms. It is about the unstoppable collision between human pride and divine sovereignty. It is the picture of nations thinking they can dominate, control, and silence the purposes of God, only to find that their might is a shadow compared to his. The imagery Ezekiel gives is not meant to terrify, it is meant to awaken. It forces us to see that behind every movement of politics, every alliance of powers, and every threat of war lies a greater hand, a hand that sees beyond what the eyes can see. And this truth carries power for you, because the forces Ezekiel describes are not only on the battlefield of nations, they are forces you have felt in your own life. Pride that tries to rise above what is right, fear that tries to silence your courage. Darkness that whispers you cannot win. Gog and Magog are not just nations. They are the timeless representation of the battles we face in the human heart. They symbolize every attempt of opposition, every force that tries to break what God has promised. When you understand this, prophecy becomes personal. It is no longer a distant narrative. It is a mirror reflecting your own struggle to stand, to believe, to endure. And yet, in the prophecy, there is always one unshakable truth. Those who rise against God cannot prevail. The kingdoms of men may roar, but they are dust before his breath. The armies of this world may boast, but they are nothing before his power. This is the hope that Ezekiel's vision ignites. It reminds us that when everything around you feels overwhelming, you are not powerless. You are held by the same sovereign strength that brings down empires and raises up his people. Imagine the courage this gives you to know that your battles are not fought alone, to know that the same God who writes history also fights for your future. This transforms the way you live. It shifts fear into faith, despair into determination, weakness into unshakable strength. You begin to see every obstacle not as the end, but as the very stage where victory is being written. The message is clear. What Ezekiel saw is not just about nations that once were. It is about the truth that still reigns. Human power rises, but divine purpose prevails. And the more you grasp this, the less you will live as a victim of circumstance, and the more you will live as a warrior of faith. Prophecy is telling you that no matter how strong the opposition appears, the outcome is already sealed. God's plan is immovable, and when you align yourself with it, you are unshakable. This is why the prophecy still speaks today. Not to paralyze us with fear, but to ignite us with courage, to remind us that though nations tremble and empires boast, there is a higher throne, and it is unshaken. And if that throne holds history, it also holds you. Look at the world today, and you will see a region that refuses to leave the headlines. The Middle East is not simply a place on a map. It is the center of tension, the eye of the storm, the place where history and prophecy collide. Empires have fought over it, religions have been born from it, and nations have been divided by it. And still, every generation turns its eyes there, because something inside us knows that what happens in that land is never small, never isolated, never without global consequence. Why does this one region draw the attention of the entire earth? Why do leaders of every nation watch its borders, measure its movements, and weigh its conflicts as if the fate of the world depends on it? Because it does. The land carries weight beyond politics, beyond resources, beyond geography. It is the stage where the eternal meets the temporal, where prophecy begins to touch reality, where humanity is forced to recognize that there is a script unfolding far greater than any government could ever write. And this matters to you because what happens on that stage echoes into every corner of the earth. Wars fought there ripple into economies, into security, into the sense of stability for people thousands of miles away. A single decision in those lands can send waves of uncertainty across the globe, reminding us all of how fragile the systems we trust truly are. Yet prophecy tells us it is not fragility without direction. It is the shaking that precedes awakening. It is the storm that exposes what cannot be shaken. Think of the human cost that flows from this conflict. Families torn apart, children growing up with the sound of sirens instead of laughter, communities carrying generations of grief. And yet, even in this pain, prophecy speaks. It tells us that suffering is not unseen, that anguish is not forgotten, and that every tear shed in that land is counted. There is purpose even in pain, because every act of violence, every broken treaty, every cry for peace that never arrives, reminds us of the words spoken long ago. The conflict in this region is not just political, it is spiritual. That realization changes how you see the world and how you see your own life. Just as the Middle East stands at the crossroads of prophecy, your life too is a stage where battles are fought and choices are made. You may not see armies outside your door, but you feel the weight of struggle inside your soul. You feel the clash of hope against despair, of peace against chaos, of light against darkness. And just as prophecy points to the victory of God over the storms of nations, it also points to his victory in you. The Middle East is not the distraction of the world. It is the revelation of the world. It forces every one of us to face a deeper truth, that the conflicts we see are not random, they are reminders. Reminders that humanity cannot create lasting peace on its own. Reminders that we need something greater, someone greater, to restore what is broken. And that same greater power that steadies nations is the same power offered to steady your life. This is why the eyes of the world are fixed on that land, because within the conflict lies a message, within the chaos lies a warning. And within the prophecy lies hope. Hope that what was spoken is being fulfilled, and hope that what is shaking the earth is preparing it for something greater than we can imagine. What makes prophecy so staggering is that it does not merely describe chaos, it names the alliances, the rising powers, the movements of nations that gather with one purpose, to stand against what God has declared. Ezekiel spoke of coalitions forming, of rulers uniting under a banner of defiance, of forces converging to wage war against his people. And today, when you look across the landscape of our world, you can see the shape of those alignments taking form. Nations that once opposed one another now stand together. Powers that once competed now cooperate under shared interests. The script written long ago is beginning to look like the headlines of today. This realization should not paralyze you, it should awaken you, because the human mind is wired to seek patterns, to connect the dots, to recognize when history is echoing words spoken long ago. That spark of recognition is not an accident. It is designed to shake you from complacency, to remind you that we are not drifting aimlessly into the future. We are moving toward an appointed time. The alignments we see are not coincidences. They are confirmations, and there is a profound lesson here for your own life. Just as nations form alliances, forces in your own journey gather against you, fear aligns with doubt, temptation joins hands with discouragement, distraction partners with delay. These forces unite to keep you from stepping into the purpose God has already written for you. But just as the prophecy shows that these alliances cannot stand against divine sovereignty, the same is true in your life. What rises against you may look powerful, but it is already defeated in the presence of God's plan. This truth brings strength in the face of what seems impossible. It tells you that you are not at the mercy of the alliances formed against you, whether they are global or personal. You are held by a power that is unshaken, a purpose that cannot be broken, and a destiny that no enemy can erase. That is why prophecy is not a story of fear but of courage. It tells you that no matter how great the opposition, it is temporary. No matter how united the enemy appears, it is destined to collapse. The weight of inevitability rests on these words. What is written cannot be undone. Nations may rise and fall, leaders may boast and threaten, but prophecy has already declared the outcome. That certainty gives you a choice. You can live in fear of what is forming around you, or you can stand with faith in the one who has already overcome it. You can see alliances as threats, or you can see them as reminders that the story is unfolding exactly as promised. And when you choose faith, everything changes. You stop being shaken by every headline, every crisis, every rumor of war. You stop living as if the world is spiraling out of control, and you start living as if history is moving toward fulfillment. This is where strength is born, not from ignoring reality, but from seeing reality through the lens of prophecy. The alliances may rise, the enemies may gather, but the outcome has already been decided, and that outcome declares that God's purpose will prevail. This is the power of prophecy. It turns what could terrify you into the very evidence that strengthens you. It takes fear and transforms it into faith. It reminds you that nothing, no alliance, no power, no scheme, can erase what has already been written by the hand of God. There is a moment when the noise of nations colliding reaches its peak, when the alliances that have formed unleash their fury, when human pride believes it stands on the edge of ultimate victory. That is the moment prophecy describes as the clash of kingdoms, when the power of man rises to its highest point only to be brought face to face with the reality of divine sovereignty. Every empire that has ever stood has believed it was unshakable. Every ruler intoxicated by power has believed they were untouchable. Yet history bears witness to the same outcome over and over again. Nations fall, thrones crumble, kingdoms fade into dust, and still one kingdom remains. This is not just a story of history repeating itself. It is a revelation of how fragile human power truly is. The armies may march, the leaders may boast, the weapons may glisten in the sun, but compared to the hand of the Almighty, they are as nothing. This is the tension Ezekiel saw, the might of humanity colliding with the unshakable throne of God, and every time prophecy declares the same conclusion: divine sovereignty will prevail. Think about what that means for your own life. You have faced moments when opposition felt overwhelming, when the pressure against you seemed insurmountable, when the forces aligned in your path felt too strong to overcome. Yet no matter how powerful those forces appeared, they were still subject to a higher power. The same truth that brings down kingdoms is the truth that lifts you up when you feel crushed. It is the assurance that your life is not at the mercy of circumstance, but anchored in a greater purpose. When you realize this, fear begins to lose its grip. Because fear feeds on the illusion that the enemy is stronger than you, that the storm is greater than your strength, that the conflict will consume you. But prophecy exposes the lie. It shows that even when the world shakes, God's plan stands. Even when kingdoms clash, His kingdom is unshaken. And when you choose to stand within that kingdom, you are unshakable too. This is not just encouragement, it is a call to courage. A call to stand when everything around you says to collapse, a call to believe when doubt surrounds you, a call to rise with strength when the world tells you to bow in fear, because the clash of kingdoms is not only about nations and prophecy, it is about the battle inside you. The kingdom of fear against the kingdom of faith, the kingdom of compromise against the kingdom of conviction, the kingdom of despair against the kingdom of hope. And just as prophecy shows the final victory of God, it also declares the victory waiting in your own battles if you stand with Him. Every clash is an opportunity. Every confrontation is a proving ground. Every struggle is a place where God shows that His strength is greater than your weakness. And when you grasp that truth, you stop running from the battles in front of you and begin facing them with the confidence that you cannot lose when you stand with the one who has already won. So remember this: kingdoms rise, kingdoms fall, but the kingdom of God endures forever. Align yourself with it, and no matter what storm comes, no matter what opposition gathers, you will remain standing when everything else has fallen. When prophecy speaks of kingdoms clashing, it does not limit its scope to one land or one people. It tells us that the tremor of this conflict will shake the entire earth. What begins in one region does not stay confined. It spreads outward like waves from an earthquake, touching every nation, every economy, every life. And that is exactly what we see in our world today. A single spark in the Middle East can rattle global markets, unsettle governments, and send shockwaves of fear across continents. This is no accident. It is the reminder that prophecy is not local, it is global. The shaking of nations is a shaking of humanity itself. When stability collapses in one part of the world, it exposes the fragility of systems everywhere. People begin to question what they thought was secure. They wonder if peace is possible, if security can last, if hope has a place in a world that feels ready to unravel. But this is where prophecy carries its most powerful message. The shaking is not the end. The shaking is the sign. It is the evidence that the words spoken long ago are unfolding before our very eyes. And within that truth lies hope, because when everything that can be shaken begins to fall, what remains unshaken becomes clear. Fear is shaken, corruption is shaken, false securities are shaken, but God's word, God's plan, God's kingdom, they remain. This is why you do not need to collapse with the systems of the world. You can stand on something greater, something eternal, something that cannot be broken by war, by crisis, or by the failures of men. Think about what this means for your life right now. The world may tremble around you, but that does not mean you have to tremble within. You may see instability in nations, in economies, in communities, but that does not mean you must live unstable. The same power that steadies the course of history is the power available to steady your heart. The same God who directs nations also directs your steps, And when you anchor yourself in him, the shaking around you becomes proof that you are standing on the one foundation that will never collapse. The psychology of fear is contagious. When people see nations in conflict, they absorb that anxiety into their own lives. They live smaller, they shrink back, they hold on to safety instead of reaching for purpose. But prophecy calls you to the opposite. It calls you to live larger, to rise higher, to refuse to be paralyzed by what shakes the world, because what terrifies the earth should not terrify you, it should strengthen you. It should remind you that you belong to a kingdom not of this world, a kingdom that cannot be touched by the collapse of systems or the roar of armies. This is the mindset that transforms despair into determination. When others see destruction, you see preparation. When others feel hopeless, you feel expectant, because you know that prophecy has never failed and it will not fail now. The shaking is not random. It is purposeful. It is stripping away illusions. It is exposing weakness. And it is preparing the world for what is coming next. And if you are awake, if you are anchored, if you are aligned with the unshakable, then you will not only survive the tremors of this age, you will rise through them. Amidst the tremors of nations, amidst the roar of armies, and the uncertainty of global